Hello and welcome to my video today. I'm excited to be pairing up with Pip Todman again for our monthly video here where we take a suite of product and we share all of the things that you can do with it. So today we are using this beautiful set here. I will have all the supplies listed in the description below. I used the paper and then I used a couple different stamp sets because I actually did not have a lot from this sweet, but spoiler alert, there is these beautiful gnome products in the upcoming catalog. So I just ordered the dies. They'll be here this next week. And I am planning on keeping this now that I know it is carrying over to the next catalog. So I'm just showing you the paper. I'm sorry my camera was a little bit shaky there in the beginning. I'm getting used to doing voiceovers and editing it this way. So I'm using the paper, which I just showed you, and then I just pulled out two of my stamp sets that I'm going to use. So I'm going to show you a one sheet wonder. And this is with 6x6 paper. So what I like to do with these is I like to take 2 sheets of paper to make my cards. If you use 1 sheet of 6x6 paper, you can make 4 cards, but they're all going to have the same designs on them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how to cut this. You're going to take a 6x6 piece of paper. Your first cut is going to be 1.5, and then you're going to flip it and you're going to cut it at 5.25. Now, by doing 2 pieces together, you're going to have 2 different designs to work with. So that little piece that's left over, you're not going to use it, but I'm going to show you everything that I have left at the end. Your next cut is going to be at 3 inches, and then you're going to turn it and you're going to cut at 1 inch 3 times. There will be a diagram on my website, and there will be measurements under each of the cards that we make. By doing 2 sheets of 6x6 paper, you're going to be able to make uh, a lot more cards than 4. Now, I made 6, but at the very end of the video, I'm going to show you what I have left. So your very last strip is 1.5, and then you're going to cut 1.5 again 4 times. So you'll have 4 sets of 1.5 by 1.5 inch squares. Okay, so that is how you're going to cut that 6x6 paper. Now, I'm not using that design. I'm going to use a different design that I've already cut up, but I wanted to show you, I wanted you to have a visual of the way to cut it. So I'm sorry I didn't edit that part out where I zoomed in. I missed that edit. So I took 1 piece of cardstock, which was Bermuda Bay, 8.5 by 11. And then I took 6 card bases. So I did 4 in Mint Macaroon or Coastal Cabana. I think I did 4 in Coastal Cabana. Okay, I'm totally lying to you. I did 6 card bases in Coastal Cabana. So you can see them here. Okay, so then you can see that I've added the strips of paper. I'm using that Bermuda Bay piece of cardstock to do my layers, and I'm going to show you at the very end of the video the pieces I had left. So literally, to make these cards, you're going to need 2 pieces of 6x6 pattern paper, 1 piece of 8.5 by 11 cardstock that you can cut up and use as layers, and then you will need 3 pieces of colored cardstock to make your bases for your cards. So what I wanted to do is emboss the card fronts. So I'm showing you this one time, but I did emboss all of the card fronts of the cards. And I just picked a snowflake embossing folder. We all probably have a million embossing folders that we can use. And I embossed the front of the card. And then these are the 2 strips that we cut at the very beginning. So they're the 1.25 inch strip by 5.25. And so I just made a layer, and then you see I made 2 of those. Now you could use both of these strips on 1 card, but I really wanted to get several cards out of this, so I went ahead and I did them both separate. These really cute gnomes I cut out of one of the pieces of pattern paper. Like I said, I didn't have the dies and I didn't have the stamp set for this. I wasn't planning on purchasing it until I saw that they were in the new catalog. So I just cut out those from the pattern paper. I fussy cut them, and I loved that. I mean, it's super simple, and you can see They look beautiful and it just saves you a little bit from stamping, right? If you're wanting to get some cards done quickly. So I am using one of the sentiments from that stamp set. I wanted a couple sentiments that were really tiny. So that's how I picked my sentiments for this project, is I wanted something really tiny. So this says, "Thanks so much." And so I'm using that designer paper, those stamp sets, and then I will use the embellishments from this set of product. So I'm just layering that. You can see that I did two of the little gnomes on that card there. And then these are the embellishments that I'm using. And I'm going to sprinkle them on my card like I do. If you've followed me for any amount of time, you know this is what I always do. So that's my first card. The second card here, I'm just going to do the one gnome on here. And you can see a little bit of the embossed card front. And here I'm just shopping around a few different things of how I want to put it. Like I used that oval to see if maybe I would layer that. It turned out that was a little bit larger than I wanted. So I just did that. Thanks so much underneath that one gnome. And then of course I took my Winka Stella to add to the pattern paper to give it a little bit of glimmer and shine. Doesn't come out in the video, but in the photos you can probably see it. So the next pieces that I used was the strips. So these are the measurements of these are the 3-inch by 1-inch strips. And again, I'm sorry I didn't edit this part out. I missed a little bit. So I took those 3-inch by 1-inch strips and I layered them onto some Bermuda Bay. So that Bermuda Bay piece is 3¼ by 3¼ and then I layered the strips on there. I have a white stylish shaped circle. I added a gnome to that, and then I want to do another circle to add my sentiment. And so I do something so crazy here. I cut my stamps up, and there is going to be a few times I show this. I left this in so that I could talk through how to do this because I know it makes people really nervous. So I wanted a little snowflake and I didn't have one. And so I took this really large sentiment and it has the snowflake in it and I totally cut it right out of the sentiment. And I'm going to show you later how I put that back together. It doesn't harm your stamps and you can get more use out of them. And so I really encourage you to cut up your stamp sets. I know it can feel stressful, but particularly with the photopolymer, it's really easy to do so if you just take your time. So I used that snowflake to add that to the sentiment, a little bit of like the snowflake to the actual sentiment to fill that space in. So now I'm using one of the extra pieces of designer paper, and I'm just going to use that as a layering piece. I did have several pieces that were left over, so I didn't mind doing this. And again, I apologize for leaving that part in. The editing is tricky when you're doing a voiceover. So these, the pieces that I used for this, these are the 1½ by 1½ inch squares. And I just layered them onto a Bermuda Bay piece and to put right here in the middle. And you can see that with my square on this card, I left quite a large border, but you could definitely make that square a little bit smaller. So I wanted to use this larger sentiment at the bottom, and it says Jolly. And so I stamped that in Bermuda Bay to bring a little bit of the Bermuda Bay color in with the sentiment, and I'm going to layer that on the bottom, but I realized that there's a secondary kind of sentiment that's supposed to go with that, and it says "'Tis the season to be jolly," and so I stamped that in Pool Party. It's really light, but it shows up in, like, when you're actually looking at the card, it shows up a little bit better than it does on video. So I added that to the very bottom and then put one of the gnomes on dimensionals and put that right in the middle of that. And again, I have my card base embossed with snowflakes, and then that makes those two cards. So far we have 4 cards. So we're going to jump into the last 2 cards. And for this one, I'm using the one and a half by 1.5 squares, because remember we have double of those, so we end up having 8 of them. And then I'm using a 3 by 3 square. And actually, in the beginning, I said I used all Coastal Cabana cardstock. I didn't. I used 4 pieces. Um, I used 2 pieces of Coastal Cabana to make 4 card bases, and then 1 piece of Pool Party to make 2 card bases. But I did this inking over the snowflakes with Bermuda Bay, which darkened up the cardstock. So I totally apologize. I butchered the amount of cardstock that I used. Check out my blog post, and I will have that typed out if you want to recreate this, along with a diagram of how you cut your paper. So maybe follow my blog post and my video together, because I totally butchered that. I apologize. I'm getting used to doing these voiceovers, and it is a little bit different than just walking through the project the first time around. So I'm just going to add these layers, and I want to do them in, a couple different directions. And so I'm just figuring out, just shop your pieces around, get your cardstock out, get these pieces out that you create, and then just see how they feel or how they look on your cardstock. So I have no idea what I'm doing off camera here. I'm so sorry. So let's dive in here to I think I must have been adding foam is what I must have been doing to this piece. So originally I was going to put it in a strip like this, but what I decide to do is I decide to turn it. After I get the gnome on here and I'm like trying to figure out like the best placement, I realize the designer paper with the gnome on it is kind of throwing me off. So I'm gonna see if maybe I can add an extra piece. That was an extra piece that was left, and I thought maybe that would be enough to then add my gnome on the front, but it still doesn't look right. So I decide to turn it and then just put my gnome right over that pattern piece. And I actually at first did not like this, and I thought, oh, I'm just gonna have to do this because it's what's gonna work. But once I get it together, it actually works really well. And the gnome on the designer paper is obviously in a weird place because it's sideways, but once you put your other gnome over it, it works great. Now, it would even look better to use the the die cut gnomes on here, because that gnome is a little bit different and a little bit bigger. And that would work really well too. So I'm going to cut more of my stamps up. So I want to layer this in the square. So I actually cut all the words. So now I can stack all of the words. So now I've been able to use this sentiment on a long strip, on a circle, on a small circle, and now on a small square by cutting it up. And so I cut up the middle word that is snow, and I stamp that in Pool Party. The thanks, and then the next word, much, is stamped in Bermuda Bay. So it's not perfectly centered. I didn't want to re-stamp it. I wanted to leave this in here so you can see that it doesn't always turn out perfect the first time. If I was going to do that again, I would probably use my Stamparatus if I wanted it perfect. I'm never worried about my cards being perfect. I'm never worried about any of my projects being perfect, because I don't want to be picky. I want to be crafty. That is what I want to do. And so even though that sentiment is not perfect, I'm not going to be picky, and I'm just going to keep it the way it is. I'm going to add some embellishments here to it. And what I've realized as I get to this point is I've sort of forgotten about my embellishments, and I've just been making the cards. So I'll go back at the end and I will add a lot of the embellishments. So here I'm going to take a couple of these strips. These are the 1 inch by 3 inch. And I had a couple of these left over, so I'm going to make a strip by just putting them together. So that's the great thing about taking 2 pieces of 6 by 6 to do a one sheet wonder, is you have double the amount of pieces and you have 2 different designs. So it gives you a little bit more variety when you're putting these cards together. So almost every single time I do a one sheet wonder, I cut 2 sheets up so I have coordinating designs. So I've just added that to the edge, and then I'm taking this 3 inch by 3-inch pattern paper. I layered that with a 3¼ by 3¼ inch Bermuda Bay piece, and I added that. Now I have a stylish shaped circle, and I'm gonna add that to the edge, and then I'm gonna add another one of those gnomes on top of that. And my white paper had a little blemish on it, but it ended up being fine because the gnome covered it. So I'm using dimensionals and I'm going to pop them up. These cards have a lot of dimension. They should be fine going through the post office just with a normal stamp, but I am using quite a bit of dimension and you have to be careful. They cost more to mail them if that happens, if they're a little bit bulky. So I'm taking that snowflake again and I'm stamping the snowflakes onto that piece I'm going to add my sentiment to. So now what I'm going to do is, you can see I've cut this entire stamp apart, but I'm going to put it right back together. And the great thing about it is it almost is like a magnet, and it goes right back together. It almost like sucks the stamp together when you start to put it back together, and it's stamped beautifully. There were no issues with it, and then I put it back in my stamp case all together. So I know that it's stressful. I cannot like express that. I know how stressful that can be, but it really opens up your world when you cut your stamps up. So the only thing I would do different with this is I wished that my sentiment was on a colored piece of cardstock and it was embossed. That I think would have looked a little bit better. So here's these two, and then there is this one that has the embellishments on it, and then this one I'm going to add some embellishments to it because I realized that I forgot to add the embellishments. And this one I'm doing a little bit different. I'm going to space them out and use two large ones and then one small one on either side of it, just for something a little different. I rarely do anything different with my embellishments, but I thought maybe I could step outside my comfort zone a little. So here is the one of the first cards we worked with, and I'm using two different shades of the embellishments and adding those in that corner. And then there are those two. So I made 6 cards using this one sheet wonder technique. And now I'm going to show you what I have left. Those are the gnomes that I have left after fussy cutting them out. And then this is the pattern paper I have left. So I have one 3 by 3. I have a couple of the 1.5 by 1.5 inch squares. And then that is the Bermuda Bay cardstock I have left. So not bad. I could have made more cards if I wanted to, but I think these turned out beautiful. So thank you so much for joining me. Make sure you pop over to make sure you pop over to Pip Todman's YouTube channel and her video to check out her cards. And then I also have 2 videos on the screen here from recent videos. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and I will catch you in my very next video.